Welcome to the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Tom Kelly, your nonprofit catalyst. As the founder of Charity Auctions Today and Donor Books, I've spent almost 2 decades helping organizations like yours break through fundraising barriers, engage communities on a deeper level, and accelerate meaningful growth. In this podcast, along with my incredible guests, we'll uncover transformational ideas, tackle challenges head-on, and share insider strategies that you won't find anywhere else. Each episode is designed to take your nonprofit to the $1 million mark and beyond, because impact doesn't scale by chance, it scales by choice. So let's get started. Mariah, thank you so much for being on the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast.
Thank you so much, Tom, for having me. So excited to be here.
Yeah, so we're talking about such a great topic today because I actually own a company that does event software management for online auctions. So I've been in this world for quite a while, and the event sponsorships are probably the biggest question that I get all the time of like, hey, I just don't have any sponsors, or I don't know how to get sponsors, or maybe they're not giving enough, or I maybe left some money on the table from extra donations because I just didn't ask for enough at the beginning. Yeah. And I know this is your world. This is what you do. You help nonprofits basically find and bring in those event sponsors and try to get them to raise more money. So I just want to dive right in and, can we just get a quick update on, what makes sponsorships, event sponsorships so valuable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe that sponsorships are a valuable stream of income for nonprofits, particularly because they're unrestricted funds, unlike a stream like grants that might come in that typically have some sort of restriction attached to them. The other thing I think about sponsorships being unrestricted, but you can also really truly build really long lasting partnerships, which goes a long way and goes beyond the dollar that is being given to you by an organization that is wanting to partner with the work and the impact that you're making in the community. And so when I think about sponsorships as a whole and how they are valuable to a nonprofit out there, it really is looking beyond that dollar to really build a long-standing partnership that can help sustain the work over time and allowing you to do that work in an unrestricted way and to allocate it in the ways that you need to allocate it to. And so really when I think about kind of the benefit of that for an organization that is going after a sponsor, it allows them to make a greater impact within the community without having to pull from maybe an operations budget or some other type of budget. And what I see oftentimes in the nonprofit space, and particularly for smaller nonprofits just barely getting started, or maybe they've been running for maybe 3 to 5 years, I meet a lot of EDs that are they're so passionate about the work that they'll pull out of their 401ks or they'll pull out of their own personal savings in order to make that impact. And so having those partnerships through sponsorships are valuable so that you can do the work without creating burnout for yourself, as well as tapping into your own personal dollars to serve the community that you love and that you want to make sure that you see thrive.
Well, and I would also think that having an event sponsorship is kind of a great way to, one, reach out to local businesses with a specific agenda of saying, hey, I need an event sponsorship. But then after they can kind of see and learn more about your organization, could potentially become a long-term donor to your organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's a great opportunity for co-collaboration, right? You can get more creative regarding what is it going to look like to also make sure that that sponsor is also benefiting from that sponsorship that they've made to your organization. And I think oftentimes nonprofit have made a pretty common mistake where it's very one-sided in terms of, hey, I just need this money to cover the cost of an event, but really understanding that sponsorships, and I teach people this all the time, it is not a donation. It is a marketing tool for organizations to sponsor another organization. They want access to an audience. They want to potentially see some return on investment. They want to maybe test a product out. And so when they're making those sponsorship commitments to an organization, it really has to feel like a win-win. And when it feels like a win-win, there's higher chances that you will be able to retain that sponsor, really creating that sponsor loyalty cycle where they're coming back to you oftentimes because you're giving value to them and they're giving value to you. And I really like to explain it to people in the way of like building a relationship with a friend or a significant other. You go through these phases of getting to know one another and now making the commitment, right, to one another in whatever way that looks like. But there's some mutual benefits from both ends. You get to make the impact, you get to secure the dollars. Your audience is also very happy and pleased with the events and the experiences that you're putting on. That community engagement is really high for your org as well as the sponsor. And the sponsors get to have access to your audience and engage with your audience in a way that maybe traditional marketing tactics like billboards and commercials may not be able to produce, because sponsorships are usually attached to an experience, creating emotional stamp in people's brains, which oftentimes translates to brands being more recognizable as and remembered by an event attendee because of the experience that they have through a sponsorship. So there's lots of values connected to it, and brands know that by sponsoring organizations, they can see anywhere between 11 to 20% increase of return on investment, even if they're not selling anything at the actual event. It's really about that brand experience and that emotional connection that is created during those experiences.
When you first go into a new nonprofit that you're working with, how many of them do you feel are not utilizing their sponsorships to the level that they should be? Like you just mentioned, like, selling maybe some of their goods at that event, or even just following up afterwards, or really putting them in the room, maybe having some of their salespeople there to just talk and explain kind of what they do from the business side of things at some of these events. Like, what are some of those things that you usually suggest to them to do that you see when you first come in that they're just not doing?
Yeah, I think sometimes nonprofits can be really one-sided, right, regarding what
Yeah.
that benefit is, and really looking at it from the lens of this is a donation, there's no strings attached. But there are strings attached, and they come in the form of brand benefits. And I believe that nonprofits can start to get a little bit more creative in regards to what they potentially offer a sponsor in exchange for their dollars. And this goes beyond, having their logo placed somewhere, or having their um, maybe some event signage, or having their some verbal recognition at that event. What are some additional creative ways? So I've worked with a client before. I was creating their sponsorship deck, and they're working to send young Black girls to Ghana for a cultural exchange and global citizenship type of exposure, where they'll do service projects, but also understand and learn about the culture. And one of the things that we talked about in terms of how we packaged their sponsorship deck was focusing in on some of the opportunities that brands could have access to that would be non-traditional. So what does it look like to have some in-flight commercials happening on those screens before those girls head off to Accra, Ghana? Or what does it look like to have a complete the runway, right, from the sitting area to the actual plane, or in the sitting area, like what does that look like, to really highlight some of the brands that will be attached, right, to this opportunity. And so really making that impression with young girls that again will allow the company to see some potential return on investment. Now, when you think about sponsorships, it really is a long game, because sometimes the ROI is not quickly, it's not always one for one, and it's also not always something that quickly happens. And so when you think about different branding opportunities, you have to really assess, what do you have access to? Are people buying into you and because you have a level of association that they can't get at another organization? Are they buying into you because you've got a particular type of audience and a wide range of audience in terms of audience size that they cannot get somewhere else? So I always go in really trying to help people understand their uniqueness and helping them to assess what they can essentially offer a sponsor that is traditional and non-traditional, and that really just depends on the nonprofit case by case scenario. And I think people should do a really good job of really thinking through not only this one event that they're trying to sell to a sponsor, but also thinking through how can I bake them into other parts or lines of business within my nonprofit organization that they can touch and they can benefit off of, so that we get the benefit of the dollars and having a really strong partnership, but they also get the benefit based off of what their goals and objectives are. And anytime I tell people, when you have that first meeting with a sponsor, if in fact you get to have a meeting, that first meeting should really be you getting to know how they run their program, what their program is all about, versus you trying to come in and pitch your thing, because you really need to understand what are their goals and objectives and how can your events or opportunities help them meet their goals. You have to really kind of go into those meetings really feeling like and being the solutionist for their problems as well. And I think that just creates a long lasting partnership for sure.
And kind of as you were talking there, the vision that popped in my head was like when you go to one of these conferences and a for-profit conference has sponsors, but then those sponsors have a booth and maybe they have like a meet and greet or cocktail hour. Are you talking about possibly at like your fundraising gala or your run or walk, getting some of these sponsors to have a table or a booth in your event where people can just get more information on who they are and what they do, and maybe they can give away some freebies or anything like that? Is that kind of what you're talking about here?
Yeah, in terms of that would be like a brand benefit, right? So having a booth, maybe having some event signage or some stage signage, depending on what type of event that you're hosting. And I think those things are still valuable. But what I am seeing in the sponsorship industry is people have to really look at where the industry is shifting, and it's shifting very fast. Sponsorships was started in the sports industry, and billions of dollars are contributed to sponsorship dollars in America. And so the sports industry is shifting drastically. So just like we would consider you know whatever's happened on the West Coast is going to shift over to the other parts of our nation. That's how I look at sponsorship. So what's happening in the sports industry, people kind of look at that to see kind of where those trends are going. And I do think booths are great, but how can we get more creative with booth opportunities so that people are not just getting information and you're not just passing out bags, but there's opportunities where people can engage with the particular brands that are on site in a very creative way. Now, I do believe that nonprofits should walk into those meetings with some ideas of what it could look like for a sponsor in terms of how they can activate that is not as traditional, or will make them stand out from the next bank, right? That's also at the event. Like, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's some co-creation that can happen between that organization that is sponsoring and the nonprofit to really kind of understand how do we want to create this experience, because the experience really also helps the nonprofit in regards to now people are anticipating coming back to your one run walk the next time because they had such a great time and it was such a unique experience when they engage with these different booths. And I say booths loosely because a booth can look like a traditional booth as we know it, as a tent table, two chairs, or it can look like, hey, in this 10 by 10 space or 10 by 20 space, I actually walk through a maze and learn about a particular company to really understand and kind of get a feel for what this company represented. And so that co-creation can happen with these brands that are coming on board so that the experiences are unique, and then the audience that's coming back, you now have such a valuable asset or property where your audience is going to be talking about, wow, I can't wait to next year, building that anticipation for next year. So you can utilize that as data, and you can utilize that as a selling point to say, hey, 50% of our audience that come, or 70% of our audience that come to this event, they anticipate the next year. We know that we can confidently say that, we had 1,500 people this year, that we're going to increase this to 1,700 or 2,000, whatever that looked like. So it becomes now a selling point for you to bring more partners on board that will understand and be able to see the value of what they kind of can potentially get in front of.
Well, and I think this is great because I never would have thought to think of it like that. Like, you think about these trade shows and you spend these thousands and thousands of dollars to have a booth there.
Yeah.
And again, you're not guaranteed anything. You just know that like-minded people are going to be there that might want your product. This could be a great selling point to these other businesses in your local community that are already paying for these booths, but getting into a room for a quarter of the price, which could, again, maybe get them more business, which was a great way to kind of pitch it to them in a way of saying, hey, bring your whole booth set up like you do at this one trade show, but let's set it up here, or let's give you a table, or let's create that walkthrough interactive experience like you talked about.
Absolutely.
I think that's just a great idea.
Absolutely. And you don't have to do it for every every brand that comes on board, because maybe they
Yeah.
don't have the additional funds to help support that off cost that, right, or the off cost of that, but doing it for a few of them to where the experience doesn't seem one dimensional, where again, your audience engaging with those particular events really feel like it was such a dynamic event that they want to come back, and they enjoy receiving the information from the companies. They enjoyed engaging with the companies. And I think that's why it's so important to understand what is the company's goals. Maybe they are really focused on community engagement. Maybe they're focused on pushing a new product line that they have, and they really need to get the information or the education out about it. So everybody has different goals. And so those setups we can break the mold essentially and create setups that will work well for helping the organization meet their goal.
Yeah. Now, I know when we talk about this, there's so many businesses in the local community. Like, what is the best way to kind of evaluate what type of sponsors to go after that might be the perfect fit for you, instead of trying to cast a wide net and go after everybody? Or is that the goal, or does it matter?
Yeah, I think you should definitely be strategic on who you approach and why you're approaching them. So when I am coaching clients, I really help them understand, well, what brands are aligned with your brand voice and what you care about. Oftentimes, I've had people say, not oftentimes, but a few people have mentioned, well, we just want the money, like, why do we care if there's alignment? And it's that if you want it to be long term and if you want it to be beneficial, because it has to feel like a win win on both sides, you really have to be really strategic about who the brand is that will be connecting with your brand, who are you bringing into the ecosystem of your network, right, in your audience. And then you also have to think about, is it the right event for them to be a part of? I use this example because I think it's a very simple example for people to understand. Whereas, let's say you have a liquor brand. You may not go for a liquor brand sponsorship for a community festival if it's family friendly type of festival. You may not do that. But you might still need to have a liquor brand within your Rolodex of brand partnerships and relationships, maybe for a gala that you're going to be hosting. So really understanding, does this brand align with our organization? Do they care about what we care about or what we do? Do they care about the population that we serve? Are they going to be a good fit in terms of this type of event that we're hosting? Again, going back to a liquor brand versus maybe a sparkling water brand, right? And then you also have to think about whether they are a local organization or a national organization. You also have to really kind of consider what potentially their marketing dollars and budgets could potentially be. And I usually say this, particularly when I'm building out sponsorship decks and working with clients. We really want them to understand that you can still tap into a local organization that might have a large budget, or maybe they're a small mom and pop. You have to really make that assessment and really kind of determine, like, is it going to potentially be a good fit for them? And then you also have to think about, when you think about brand alignment and making sure that they're aligned with your voice and what you do, it's also important to assess whether it's a brand that you believe is going to help amplify what you're doing as well. And I always tell people, you should diversify maybe the size of their company, diversify if they're local, regional, or national companies, and really creating a pipeline oftentimes, right? Keep people in your pipeline relationally so that you can pull on them at any time. Now, I do know some organizations, they go for their, tried and true companies that have sponsored them year after year, and I think that's great. But what happens when they fall off? Because that's what happened in 2020. People fell off, they didn't sponsor anymore, and then they did not come back or recover. And so if you're always keeping relationships in that pipeline that are aligned with your brand and that care about the people that you serve, then I think that can create some great synergy. And it's particularly if they also want to be in front of the audience that you've built trust with. And I think oftentimes people come to that sponsorship table, particularly nonprofits, feeling like they don't have value. But I like to always encourage people and empower people to understand that when you come to that table, you come with confidence because you build trust with the audience that sponsor wants to get in front of. You build expertise and knowledge about the needs of the audience that sponsor wants to get in front of. And so if they want access, they should be paying for access, but they also should be not just paying for access, but really being a true partner in what you're doing, because that makes the impact of the nonprofit organization be sustained over time because of that partner is coming alongside of them.
Yeah, it makes me think about when you said don't think of a sponsor as a one-way transaction
Yeah.
of just like, give me the money and thank you for being a sponsor and not doing anything else. Recently my daughter's in a fast pitch travel softball, and they have to go out and get sponsorships from all the restaurants and businesses. And I was just thinking when you were saying that, how like we ask for 50 or $100 donations from these different restaurants to put their logo on the sign that nobody
Yeah.
sees, or on the website that nobody goes to. And we have to go into the same restaurant every year and ask for a donation. And really, I think a great way of thinking about that is the team should be saying, okay, for every restaurant sponsor, we're going to do one dinner there with the entire family,
Yeah.
and then basically say, hey, you gave us a $50 donation. We came in and we did $500 worth of food, and basically be able to show them like, hey, your $50 donation is going to get a 10x return, just from our team, and then we're going to try and bring more people in and make it a two-way street, because every time we want to make it easy for the girls the next time they go in to ask for either more money or that same donation again, because they're constantly having to go to the same restaurants year after year and be like, how about this year? Can you do it again this year? Instead of having that Rolodex of people that if it's a win-win on both sides, they're going to be more than willing to be like, hey, can I make that sponsorship? When is the time? It's about that time of year. Can I make that sponsorship to you? And they're now reaching out to you instead of you having to kind of go in, crawl in, and beg them for a
Yeah,
donation.
but see, here's the difference in that, right? It's the lens and the mindset. In what you just shared, you're asking for donations. A sponsorship is a marketing tool, it's not a donation. So if you're asking for a donation, then maybe there doesn't need to be an exchange, because the donation should have no strings attached. You're just giving out of the kindness of your heart, right? But if you're asking for a
Yeah.
sponsorship, it's a marketing tool. So if it's like, hey, if you ask for $1,000 from the local pizza place, what type of branding are they going to get in exchange for that $1,000 that will essentially drive traffic back to their business? And whether that looks like, hey, we'll put your logo on the patch of our jersey, or hey, we'll put a patch logo on our bags that we're going to walk in with, or on our water bottles, like whatever that looks like, so that that organization, that company that gave you $1,000 can now have that branding, because it's marketing, right? It's not a donation. So people look at it that way, then yeah, those are two separate types of conversations. And then it's like, hey, if you give us $5,000 for the year, we're playing in these tournaments. This will offset the cost of our girls that are traveling maybe to different locations. What does it look like in exchange for them to have some sort of yearly exposure to the audience that are coming to the games, that are maybe even coming to I don't know if maybe the practice games are really big and where you are, but like, what does it look like to have that exposure? And on top of that, we might always do our annual, celebration, MVP celebration at your site,
Yeah.
bringing in families and friends of our girls that are playing this game, so that we can also dine and contribute back to your company. So you have to really strategically think about, why do I want this brand? What do I want from them, and what do I want to do for them? Right? It has to be mutual. You want to think about, how do you want to activate them? Meaning, are you going to give them access to an event? Are you going to, give them some event signage? Are you going to maybe create a co-branded, Instagram Live or LinkedIn Live? Will there be some co-branded messaging that you're going to be merging together? So thinking about those ways before, I always tell people it's like going back to the basics of who, what, when, where, and why, and really thinking that through, particularly for your sponsors that you want to bring on board for specific events that you have planned for the following year. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That was gold. What are some of the effective methods for reaching out to potential sponsors? And is there like a best way of making a first impression?
That's a really great question. So there's definitely several methods for connecting with sponsors. Oftentimes, the question that I get is, how do you find them, right? So if we can start there first and then go into ways to do the outreach. And so typically, I tell people all the time, leveraging platforms like LinkedIn, where you're really identifying specific job titles like brand partnerships, community relations specialists or managers. Maybe someone does have a head of sponsorship, title. Most sponsorship folks don't have sponsorships in their titles, so I like to give a few additionals, because sometimes that sponsorship person is being hidden essentially in like a marketing manager title. And so looking for particular titles in order to identify the right contact for the organization that you are looking for. And I do a training on LinkedIn to really help people do that. Using tools like AI, where you can again do some filtering based on titles, based on companies, to really nail down who's a particular sponsorship contact in Pepsi, or who's a specific particular sponsorship contact at Lululemon. So really thinking about it from platforms that are like AI specific CRM systems. Other practical ways that I think that don't cost a thing for anyone are going to similar events that you're going to host. So for instance, and I do this often still, and I'll just go to booths and I'll go when the event just starts, because sometimes the sponsorship person that has coordinated all the things for a run walk or a community event, they're sometimes in those booths. And so I'll go to the booths of companies that I potentially want to work with, or that some of the clients that I've worked with want to work with. And then I will introduce myself and say, hey, it's the person who did the sponsorship. Are they here? Are they on site? They may say, hey, yeah, I'm the person, or no, they're not on site, but I guarantee you those people that were deployed for that event by the sponsorship person, right? So they're at least a few degrees away from maybe getting me closer to the contact. And so there's been several occasions I've gone to community events and I'm talking directly to the person that is making the decision on sponsorships. They're not necessarily the only sole decision maker in that chain of command, but they are more than likely the gatekeeper, the one that will become the champion of your organization within their org to justify why their organization should invest in partnering with you. And so I'll do that for community events. If I'm going to a gala, when those announcers are saying, we want to thank such and such for being here and contributing and sponsoring on today, those tables are celebrating. I'm keeping my eyes out on who are those tables, because when this event is over, I need to make a beeline over to the person and say, hey, there's a sponsorship person here. I'd love to meet them. And I just introduce myself. Hey, my name is Mariah. I'm just so thankful that, Bank of America decided to sponsor such an amazing organization. Like what gets you all involved with partnering with this organization? I always ask a question because that will keep the conversation going, and it makes it not weird, right? And people love to talk about the good work that they're doing. And so finding particular contacts at events that you're already going to, and then obviously leveraging different digital platforms like LinkedIn, like AI resources that are CRM resources. And then also people oftentimes want to cold call, but I always tell people, like, start with your hot market. Who do you already know? Who does your board member know that is working with a company that you've been wanting to work with, but you maybe have been afraid to tap into your board to make that warm introduction? Even thinking about your staff might be connected with family members that are in the particular companies that you want to sponsor your organization. We forget that people have access to a directory when they work directly in a company. And so if people have access to a directory to find someone who is potentially in that sponsorship role, they can help make that warm introduction to you. And so really thinking about it that way. And then we also forget the very traditional way of calling a reception desk and again calling to speak with someone that is over the sponsorship program within that particular organization. And again, whether you get the connection to them or not, because sometimes it doesn't happen that way where you can get to talk to a sponsor, but you at least done some due diligence on the front end where you can actually have a conversation, whether face to face, on the phone, or virtually, to where they can understand your personality, understand your vision, what you're doing with your organization, and potentially what they have access to. So in terms of outreaching, oftentimes I tell people, you're doing those methods of trying to hop on a call with them, maybe through email, but then you're also doing methods where you're applying to their online portals. Some companies have online sponsorship portals, and the simple way to do that is you Google search. Let me see, Dove, for instance, because that one always comes to mind. Dove sponsorships. You go to that, it takes you directly to their sponsorship page. You see what they support, and you see if they have an open application or if they have a cycled application process. Whole Foods the same way, Aldi's the same way. And so that's part of the outreach of just applying online, because you may not get a chance to talk to someone directly. And then the other thing, again, is just having those warm introductions by people that are already familiar with your organization and can essentially vouch for what you do and the impact that you're making in the community. So mouthful, but yeah.
Yeah. And so let's just say we finally got a sponsor on the phone or in
Yeah,
person, and they're interested. You know, what does a sponsorship package look like, and how can you make it more attractive and valuable to that sponsor to really put them over the edge and get them to write a check and actually sponsor the event?
absolutely. So sponsorship proposals or sponsorship decks should be about 7 to 10 pages. They should be very clear, very concise. And so when we think about the elements of a sponsorship deck, you're looking at a cover page, very clear, very concise. What's the date? What's the location? What is the actual opportunity? Or if there's a themed event, what is that? Then you're looking at page 2 that is all about the organization. Who are you? Right? Whether you are saying this is our mission, our vision, this is maybe our leadership, these are maybe our board members, you can get creative in what that looks like. And then that third page is going directly into what is the event. So you're sharing that information about the event. You might even, if it's a recurring event, you're sharing some data about, you know, last year we saw X number of people. This year we expect X number of people. You're sharing information about the event. You might share what's going to happen at the event, and that event about the event section might go from like a page or two, and it just depends on the type of layout that you use, whether it is a horizontal landscape or a portrait versus a like a vertical page. And so that's about page 3. Page 4 is really going to be focused in on some of the data, right? Impact data, whether it is programmatic data that you see by engaging with your participants on a day-to-day basis, or if it is event specific because you have hosted this event time and time again, and you have hopefully collected some data on the results that people have had and the transformation that people has had in result of being connected to your organization. That data should both be quantitative and qualitative. So having those testimonials. And the reason why you want to do that is because there's 3 potential types of people that will be at your decision making table. There are the thinkers. These people, they want numbers, they want facts, they're driven by data, right? They make decisions because of the data. Then you have people that are feelers. These people are moved by emotion, right? These transformational stories that should be very clear, very succinct, very short testimonials. They're moved by that. And it helps them understand if they're making a good investment in the right organization. And then the third person that could potentially be at your table is what's called a deferred. They are focused on making sure that their brand is protected by being connected with your brand. And quite honestly, you can get all 3 of those people in one person, right? But they will probably lean more towards one versus the other. Or you might really have multiple decision makers looking at your sponsorship deck that speak to those different types of ways of making decisions. And so when you think about your data page, having both quantitative and qualitative information, then you're getting to pages where they are talking about what is the benefit to the sponsor. This data and talking about the benefit to the sponsor is where I see most organizations omit it. And you really want to help them understand, well, what's in it for them. Again, this should be a win-win. This should always feel mutual. And if you don't have any of that, then and paint the picture for what it could look like for the benefit for them, it's really hard to see what the potential return on investment is. And so really pointing out what's in it for them. Are they going to be able to get some real-time insight for the product that they may have or want to talk about? Will they be able to change perceptions of their organization because they're in a particular community? We saw a lot of that in 2020. Will they be able to position themselves as thought leaders, right, as industry thought leaders by being a part of your event or your event? Or you might say maybe it's going to help them boost some sales, or maybe they'll be able to boost their email list because they'll be able to engage with people that come to their booths. So really thinking through some of the reasons why a sponsor would sponsor, and putting that in the deck so they can understand what the value potentially is for them. Then, of course, you get to the sponsorship opportunities. These are your different levels or packages. And some people are moving away from the different gold, bronze, platinum levels, and they're doing more of like menu options, or they're doing more packages that organizations could tap into. Every organization does it different, and I've seen it and still see it always. And so you pick what's going to be best for your organization, but make sure that you're offering brand benefits that you can actually execute on, not because you DIY'd or Google search, how to do a sponsorship deck, and, they had logo placement and event signage at 5K, but really add brand benefits that you can execute on, because that again creates trust and it creates sponsor loyalty, because you actually were able to execute on the things that you agreed upon in that sponsorship exchange. After the sponsorship opportunities, I always have clients add a partners and sponsors page of logos of people that have bought into them. This page is really important because it allows other companies to see who's bought into the vision and this event that they're hosting. And sometimes there might be some competitors on there that they say, hey, I want to be on there too, because we have the same audience and I want to make sure that I also can get in front of that same audience. And then the last page is like your ending page, where it's just simply your contact information, and people like to leave this page off as well. But I will say that I have in the past gotten sponsorship decks through listservs. So if there is no contact information, then I'll have to go through so many hoops just to find out whose event is this. And most people leave it off because they're saying, oh, I'm doing the outreach, it's coming from my email. They will know directly who to reach out to. But in all actuality, if someone else is passing that information along, then now people have to track down, well, who's the start, who's the source. And so when you're putting those sponsorship decks together, they should be clear, concise. They should communicate exactly what the opportunity is and how someone can partner and be a part of the impact that you're making in the community. And then not only that, they should, especially if you were able to get on a call with them, they should be able to speak to some of the things that you talked with them about in that call to make sure that it aligns with their goals as well. So let's say, for instance, if an organization really wanted to focus in on boosting their email list, well, a brand benefit that I would offer is opportunity to share their organization through our email. But I'm also going to put some data in there that says, hey, these are our email subscribers. This is our open rate. This is our click rate. So again, that sponsor can understand what is a potential return on investment or level of exposure that they can have with people that are on my email list. So really thinking about it from that standpoint as well.
Well, that's great. So, Mariah, this has been a great conversation. I know you have some resources that our listeners can download from you. What are some of those, and how can people get into your world and either work with you or just learn more about what you do?
Absolutely. So I have two different downloadables that I think are very, very valuable for organizations that might be listening. So one of them can be accessed from my website at www.thesponsorshipcatalyst.com. It is a list of what to offer sponsors. So brand benefits that you can offer sponsors, and they are tiered based off of low value to high value. And the reason why they're tiered like that is because a logo is not as valuable as a speaking opportunity where someone can position their organization as industry thought leaders. And so you diversify what that looks like based on your ability to execute. So that is the first downloadable. The second downloadable, which you all can access, is 50 sponsorship application questions. And my team and I compiled a list of 50 questions that any online sponsorship application might ask you. And this tool is really for you to be prepared prior to going to those applications, really thinking through some of the questions that people would ask so that you have the right information to complete those applications in one sitting, as well as complete them to the fullness so that you can actually articulate the impact that your organization is making. And in regards to working with me, I'd love to work with organizations that are focused in on the health and human service space.